Sarah had been a trained and well-experienced NICU nurse for quite some time. In February 2020, she took care of a sweet little baby who changed her life forever. The baby's name was Zariah Raylin. She had cerebral palsy, schizencephaly, arthrogryposis, Mobius syndrome, laryngomalacia, a tracheostomy, G-tube, and dysfunction of her arms. However, she conquered Sarah's heart almost immediately. Her parents rarely visited, and it became clear that she was going to be sent to foster care soon. One of the doctors commented that she was probably going to be in the hospital until her second birthday, because they probably wouldn't be able to find anyone to take her home. At that moment, Sarah felt that God hinted at her that she was supposed to be a part of the family. She thought there was no way she could let the precious little girl grow up in a hospital. The only problem was that she had to convince her husband, who was not a medical person at all. They had talked about doing foster care in the future, but he wanted to wait until they had been married longer. They had only been married a few months at that point. After a couple of weeks, she'd almost gotten him to say yes. But then she had a conversation with her mom that made her rethink. Her mom said that Sarah shouldn't go ahead with that unless her husband was all in, because he might end up resenting her if things go bad. Sarah realized that she was probably right, as her husband was agreeing to it just to make her happy. So Sarah prayed to God to find out exactly what he wanted them to do, and also if he would influence her husband, Steve's heart. So she didn't discuss the topic for a week and a half. Eventually, he himself brought up the topic and told her that there was something they were supposed to do. So the social worker at the hospital got them in touch with their caseworker, and she said that she wanted them to at least be a little bit interested in adoption, because she was pretty sure that's where the case was heading. Only problem was that Steve couldn't meet Zariah until after they were already fostering her because of HIPAA. So they said they could not commit themselves to it, but they were a little interested. So, at the end of April 2020, Steve finally got to meet her. As soon as he laid eyes on her, he started tearing up. He knew that she was supposed to be their daughter, and from that point on, he never looked back. The hospital required them to have all of her home health nurses in place before they could take her to their home. Incidentally, it took a fairly long time. Sarah wished to have her at home before her first birthday, but unfortunately, the baby had to spend her first birthday in the hospital without any visitors to wish her happy birthday because of COVID. They took her home on October 28, 2020, a couple weeks later. They lost all of their home health nurses in the first 3 weeks when she was at home. But luckily, Sarah was able to take 3 months off work whenever she came home. It made her feel frustrated that they had to wait for months together to take her home. To have to start from scratch, though. But anyway, the little girl was home then, and that's what really mattered. Sarah didn't really feel like a mom until that moment. Zariah liked them as well, but she got attached to them only after a couple of weeks, so much so that she would cry if anyone tried to take her out of their arms. Sarah was astonished to find that despite her baby's medical complications, her receptive language skills were barely lagging behind. She quickly learned what mommy and daddy meant, and within a short time, she learned all kinds of words and phrases. One of the last phrases she learned was, "Give mommy a kiss." And she would turn her head, lean in, and her lips would touch Sarah's cheek. Then Sarah would make a kissing noise and tell her it was a good job. She would express her excitement by smiling cheerfully. A smile would light up her face. In December 2020, her biological mom signed consent for the adoption, and in January, her biological dad signed as well. Then, on April 6, 2021, she became theirs forever. They changed her name to Zariah Raylin Yates. It was one of the happiest days of Sarah's life, and she wished it would last forever. Unfortunately, the happiness didn't last as long as they thought it would. On June 29th, while Sarah was at work and her husband was at the grocery store, Zariah went into cardiac arrest due to hypoxia. Her home health nurse panicked because she had trouble breathing and didn't do any of the things she was supposed to do. Zariah's heart and lungs were healthy, so if she had trouble breathing, it was because something was wrong in her airway. Her husband got home 2 minutes before the ambulance arrived. and almost immediately noticed that her tract was completely out. Without that, she couldn't breathe at all. He put it back in, but by that time, the damage had already been done. She wasn't breathing and didn't have a viable pulse. Sarah got a call from EMS, saying that nothing they did gave favorable results. They said helplessly that they could keep doing CPR until Sarah reached there. Sarah felt dizzy and was shocked by the turn of events. It honestly didn't feel real. The baby was perfectly fine when she left for work that morning. Sarah wasn't emotionally fit to drive a car. The supervisor offered to drive her home, but as they were pulling out, they called back and asked them to stay right there. They were able to get back her pulse and were heading to the ER at the Children's Hospital where Sarah worked. But with her medical background, Sarah knew that Zariah was probably never going to recover from that condition, and that even if she did, she'd never be the same. When the ambulance got there, Sarah ran to Steve and hugged him tightly. Both cried hysterically. Then Sarah kissed her daughter's sweet face and brushed her hair. But she probably didn't know that her mommy was there. The PICU attendant came in and said that there was every chance that she was brain dead, but they wouldn't be able to determine that until 24 hours after the event. Sarah knew that it was a possibility, but it was so hard, hearing someone who actually said that. She completely fell apart again. Luckily, in the hospital they had made an exception and allowed Sarah's mom to visit them. No doubt, Sarah was an adult and her husband was there, but in moments like this, a person needs her mom to hold her and cry with her. Sarah was crying out to God, praying for a miracle. She was also asking God, if it was time for her to go, would he take very good care of her baby until she was able to see her again? They later determined she wasn't brain dead. She was triggering the breaths on her ventilator, and her pupils were starting to respond. So they had a little bit of hope. But that night, her brain activity decreased so much on her EEG, they thought something was wrong with the machine, but it wasn't. It soon became clear that she was never going to regain consciousness, and they had to make the most painful decision that no parent should be so unfortunate enough to ever make. And when it came down to it, there was no other decision that Sarah could make. Steve wanted to remove care on Tuesday, because that would mean they officially got to be her parents exactly for 3 months. On Saturday, Sarah got to hold Zariah for the first time since this had happened. She just held her, sobbed and whispered in her ear, "I'm so sorry that this happened, and that Mommy wasn't there to protect you." During the next few days, Sarah and Steve were allowed to hold their baby close to their heart and have their family members come to say goodbye. It was so hard watching her 9-year-old sister say goodbye to her niece for the last time. Then, on July 6th, they removed the ventilator, and Sarah and her husband held their daughter with tears streaming down their cheeks while she took her last breath. They wanted to donate her organs, and that would have given her some peace, but it took 15 minutes too long for her to pass. They cried and held her lifeless body for another 30 minutes after she passed. Even though they knew she had gone, they didn't want to let her go. Then, they gathered up their courage and told the doctor that it was okay to take her away. Their parents came into the room and hugged them. They then walked out of the room. They had to leave the hospital without their daughter, and Sarah felt numb as they walked out. It was as if Sarah was emotionally drained. Her mind, her body, wasn't allowing her to feel anything more. She didn't have any more tears left to cry. They began the process of healing from this tragedy. They knew Zariah probably wasn't going to outlive them. No doctor would give them an estimated life expectancy, though, because there was probably no other child like her in the world. But everyone seemed extremely optimistic because she was doing so well. She had a TRPV4 gene mutation, which had been found only in a few people worldwide. This gene mutation explains most of her issues, but her schizencephaly was completely unrelated. So she just got really unlucky, but Sarah loved all of her little quirks. During the wonderful time they had spent with Zariah, they welcomed 4 other foster kids into their home, ranging from 1 to 7 years old. They currently have 3 still in their house. At first, Sarah wasn't sure if they could keep the kids because of everything that was going on. But then, she realized it probably would be a lot harder to come home to an empty house, and even harder to have to say more goodbyes. Their caseworkers and counselors also thought it would be better for them to stay with them, and that was 100% the right decision for their family. Sarah thanks God every day for sending those kids into their home, because they've been her saving grace in those last few weeks. Pouring her heart and soul into those kids gave her a reason to get out of the bed in the morning. And it's not just that. They make her smile and laugh after she had such a really hard time. Yes, there are lots of hard moments too, but she wouldn't trade it for the world. Sarah felt like she was doing exactly what God wanted her to do. Of course, she never understood why God took Zariah away from them so soon. No matter whatever may be the reason, she felt God is still good with her, and she's clinging to his promise in Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Sarah prays that everyone who hears about her story is impacted, and it encourages people to step out of their comfort zone and do hard things, even if they might end up getting their heart broken. Even if she knew how this was going to end, she'd do it all over again. Steve and Sarah don't regret a thing. Zariah deserved all the love in the world, and she enjoyed every second she got to be her mom.